Africa is a continent surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea to the north, the Isthmus of Suez and the Red Sea to the northeast, the Indian Ocean to the southeast, and the Atlantic Ocean to the west. These are all routes that are used to export products out of the continent to other parts of the world. Africa is undoubtedly one of the richest continents in terms of natural resources. According to research, the continent is home to about 30% of the world's mineral reserves, 12% of its oil, and 8% of its natural gas. In terms of global exports, Africa's export industry is one of the biggest in the world. Africa stands in the 5th position with over $760 billion worth of commodities shipped by African countries from 2018 to 2022. Join us as we uncover the top 10 exporting African countries that achieved the highest earnings in global exports during 2022. Make sure you watch this video to the end to find out the highest exporting African country. Let's start. 10. Ghana. Ghana's export revenue from cocoa peaked in 2018 when the total export value reached $3.2 billion, which was a 34% increase from 2017 and 71% from 2016. In 2019, exports totaled $2.7 billion, falling to $2.4 billion in 2020 as the COVID-19 pandemic hit markets, and Europe's largest cocoa importer, the Netherlands, imported lower amounts of cocoa beans from West Africa. As the global economy recovered in 2021, Ghana recorded an increase in the value of its total exports to $6.2 billion. The country earned $7.2 billion in export revenue from cocoa, oil, and gold combined on June 2022, up from $6.2 billion in the same period in 2021. Trade is concentrated in the Netherlands, Malaysia, and the United States, which together account for around 40% of the market. Germany and France round out its top 5 trading partners. 9. The Democratic Republic of Congo. The Democratic Republic of Congo is about the size of Western Europe, and it is the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa. The DRC is endowed with exceptional natural resources, including minerals such as cobalt and copper, hydropower potential, significant arable land, immense biodiversity, and the world's 2nd largest rainforest. In 2020, the DRC was the 87th economy in the world in terms of GDP and 70th in total exports. That same year, the Democratic Republic of the Congo was the world's biggest exporter of cobalt oxides and hydroxides. Exports in the DRC averaged $2.5 billion from 1960 until 2022, reaching an all-time high of $11.8 billion in 2011 and a record low of $18 million in 1960. So far, exports in the DRC have increased to over $7 billion in 2022, up from $6.9 billion in 2021. The top export destinations for the DRC are China, Tanzania, the United Arab Emirates, South Africa, and Singapore. The country's vast and varied mineral resources, rainforests, and peatlands are keys to the global energy transition, and with adequate policy frameworks and improved governance, it can raise growth and living standards for its population. 8. Tunisia. Tunisia borders Algeria and Libya by land and Italy by sea. It is a net exporter of textiles and agricultural products like olive oil, citrus, vegetables, phosphates, and chemicals. The country also exports mechanical and electrical goods and hydrocarbons. In 2021, Tunisia exported a total of $19 billion, but earned more than $21 billion in exports in 2022. From January 2022, mechanics and electronics represented Tunisia's leading export industries, with an export value of nearly $13 billion. Textiles, clothing, and leather contributed around $4 billion to the total exports, while agricultural and food products were exported for a value of approximately $4 billion. Tunisia's main export markets are European Union countries, with France, Italy, Germany, and Spain being the most important. Now is the time for you to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. The new tourist team is working hard to bring you all the educative information in Africa. Support us by joining our community, liking the video, and sharing it with friends and family. Let's continue. 7. Libya. Libya is situated in the north of Africa and shares a border to the west with Algeria, Chad, Egypt, Niger, Sudan, and Tunisia by land, and Greece, Italy, and Malta by sea. Libya is the 16th largest country in the world in terms of land mass, comprising around 1,760,000 square kilometers. Apart from petroleum, Libya's other natural resources are natural gas and gypsum. The economy of Libya depends primarily on revenues from the petroleum sector, which represents over 95% of export earnings and 60% of GDP. Substantial revenues from the energy sector, coupled with a small population, give Libya one of the highest GDP per capita in Africa. Libya was the 102nd economy in the world in 2020 in terms of gross domestic product. The country exported a total of $8.4 billion, making it the 93rd exporter in the world that year. Libya is on course to rake in some $37 billion in oil export revenues this year, but it could have been much higher were it not for a 3-month oil blockade. Libya's economic recovery is gathering momentum, boosted by a large increase in hydrocarbon output in 2021. It has been experiencing volatility in the hydrocarbon sector, the pillar of its economy, in 2022. Libya's top exports are crude petroleum, gold, petroleum gas, scrap iron, and refined petroleum, exported mostly to Italy, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Germany, and China. 6. Angola. Angola is a lower middle-income country located in southern Africa with a GDP of $74 billion, a population of 33 million, and a per capita income estimate of $3,000 by the end of 2022. Angola has 4 ports, its main port being Luanda, the capital city. Luanda is also the country's largest, most populous, and most important city. The city handles more than 70% of the country's entire exports. Angola is the 2nd largest oil producer in Africa and the 6th largest economy in the region. The country's impressive economic growth rate is being driven by its oil sector. Angola was the 80th economy in the world in terms of GDP in 2020 and 66th in total exports. That year, the export value fell to its lowest level since 2010, reflecting a decrease in the earnings from crude oil exports due to the coronavirus pandemic. In 2021, the total value of exports from Angola corresponded to nearly $33.6 billion, showing signs of recovery compared to 2020. But in just the first quarter of 2022, Angola exported more than 100 million barrels of crude oil, bringing in gross revenue of over $12 billion. According to research, its export earnings before the end of the 4th quarter of 2022 were more than $38 billion. The main export products of Angola are petroleum products, industrial diamonds, wood, marble, coffee, green tea, black tea, and mate. Angola's top export partners are China, Portugal, the United Arab Emirates, and France. 5. Morocco. Situated in the northwest of Africa, the Moroccan economy remains heavily dependent on the export of raw materials. Government attempts to increase exports and control imports have had some success, and a chronic annual trade deficit has begun to narrow. According to research in 2020, Morocco was the 58th economy in the world in terms of GDP and 60th in total exports. In fact, Morocco was the world's biggest exporter of phosphoric acid, calcium phosphates, and legumes that year. In 2021, exports of goods, services, and primary income from Morocco were $47.8 billion. Its estimated export earnings before the end of 2022 is $53 billion. Exports of goods, services, and primary income of Morocco are growing at an average annual rate of 8.9%. The top exports of Morocco are cars, mixed mineral or chemical fertilizers, insulated wire, phosphoric acid, and calcium phosphates, exported mostly to Spain, France, Italy, India, and Germany. If you are still watching this video, then you have to be subscribed and turn on notifications to get notified when we upload the content you love. Let's continue. 4. Algeria. Algeria is the largest and one of the wealthiest countries in Africa. The Algerian economy relies heavily on hydrocarbon revenues, and the sector is the backbone of the Algerian economy. Algeria is the 18th largest oil producer in the world and the 3rd largest in Africa. It is an important gas producer and a key supplier to Europe. In 2020, Algeria was the 56th economy in the world in terms of GDP and number 71 in total exports. In fact, exports were particularly low during this period due to the coronavirus pandemic. In 2021, the value of petroleum exports from Algeria amounted to over $35.4 billion. The value increased significantly compared to the previous year. Algeria expects export revenues to reach $56 billion by the end of 2022, compared with $35.4 billion in 2021, due to the increase in the price of petroleum as a result of the Russian-Ukraine war. The top exports of Algeria are petroleum gas, crude petroleum, refined petroleum, nitrogenous fertilizers, and ammonia, exported mostly to Italy, France, Spain, China, and South Korea. 3. Egypt. Egypt borders Israel and Libya by land, Cyprus, and Greece by sea, a country boasting 7 ports in total. Sitting on the west shore of the Nile Delta between the Mediterranean Sea and Mariot Lake is the port of Alexandria, which is considered the main port of Egypt's entire foreign trade. In 2020, Egypt was the 30th economy in the world in terms of GDP and 57th in total exports. During that period, the country was the world's biggest exporter of aluminum powder. Export revenues reached a record $31 billion in 2021. This is a significant increase from 2020, when proceeds from exports came in at $25 billion, according to the official balance of payments data from the Central Bank of Egypt. In the first quarter of 2022, revenues from exports were more than $20 billion. Egypt expects export revenues to reach $60 billion by the end of 2022. The top exports of Egypt are refined petroleum, gold, crude petroleum, nitrogenous fertilizers, and citrus, exported mostly to the United Arab Emirates, the United States, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Italy. 2. Nigeria. Nigeria borders Benin and Cameroon by land and Equatorial Guinea and Ghana by sea. It is the largest oil producer in Africa. The country has about 5 major ports, with the Lagos Port Complex being the largest and busiest. Nigeria's largest export sector is mineral fuels, including oil. The country's total exports recorded over $35 billion in the first quarter of 2022. It expects to earn more than $100 billion in export earnings by the end of 2022. The country's total crude oil exports stood at a stunning 45.1% increase year-on-year. The increase in the country's crude oil earnings could be attributed to the significant rise in the price of crude oil, which has remained elevated since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war on February 2022. Meanwhile, the list of top exported items by the African giant appears to be the same as always, with crude oil and natural gas topping the list, followed by urea. Other top exports of Nigeria are scrap vessels, special-purpose ships, and refined petroleum, exported mostly to India, Spain, China, Netherlands, and South Africa. 1. South Africa. South Africa is situated on one of the busiest international sea routes, and the South African government has identified the country's ports and terminals as key economic drivers of growth. It borders Botswana, Lesotho, Mozambique, Namibia, Eswatini, and Zimbabwe by land. It has 8 ports, with the port of Durban representing the largest and busiest shipping terminal in sub-Saharan Africa. South Africa was the 38th economy in the world in terms of GDP in 2020 and 36th in total exports. South Africa was the world's biggest exporter of platinum that year. Its total exports recorded over $40 billion in the first quarter of 2022. Its export earnings surged by 20% month over month to about $13.2 billion on September 2022. Its expected export earnings before the end of 2022 are more than $150 billion. Meanwhile, the top exports of South Africa are gold, platinum, charcoal briquettes, cars, and diamonds, exported mostly to China, the United States, India, the United Kingdom, and Germany. These are the highest exporting African countries in 2022. Most African countries are blessed with fertile soils, minerals, and natural resources, and that's what most of these economies rely on. It is time for all African states to start focusing on producing finished goods and exporting them to other continents. This is what will boost most African economies. Despite all these exports, most African countries' imports surpass their exports. Surprisingly enough, many African countries still import food with all the fertile land they have. African states must start focusing on agriculture and processing the yield into finished products to satisfy the local market, and then exporting the rest to Europe, Asia, and the Americas. We believe that Ghana's plan to ban the importation of food is preceded by plans to boost domestic production in the sector. We've reached the end of this video. What are your thoughts on the top exporting countries in Africa? Let us know in the comments. We are open to welcoming you to the New Tourist channel, and all you need to do is to subscribe to our channel to stay updated on Africa. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.